All right, let's jump right in. We're talking about a huge policy shift here. A law that guaranteed work for millions of people in rural India is being replaced. So, what happens when you swap a legal right for a government scheme? What does that actually mean for the folks on the ground? You know, the ones whose livelihoods are on the line. That's what we're going to unpack. What happens when this big policy idea hits the real world?
And this question, from a 60-year-old villager named Bare Jayama, just cuts right through all the noise. What good is the new scheme when we are unable to utilize the full benefits of the existing one? Wow. I mean, for her and millions of others, this isn't some abstract policy debate. It's about a simple, fundamental question. Is this promise of work actually going to be kept? Her voice, her question, really sets the stage for everything we're about to discuss.
So, to really feel the weight of that question, we've got to go to her village, Bandarugudem. This is ground zero, where the idea of a new policy stops being a headline and starts becoming a very real, very tangible concern you can almost feel in the air.
Okay, so picture this. We're in Bandarugudem, a village in Andhra Pradesh. Think narrow, muddy roads, small, low-roofed houses. And right now, there's a buzz going around about this new employment scheme that's replacing the old one. But you know, the feeling isn't excitement. It's skepticism. And it all boils down to that one simple question. Hey, if the old guarantee of work never really worked for us, why on earth should we believe this new one will be any different?
And to get why they're so concerned, we have to look back at what that old promise really was. Because this wasn't just another government program. No, it was a landmark law, and you've probably heard of it, MGNREGA. Now, the key word on this slide, the one that changes everything, is guarantee. See, MGNREGA made 100 days of work a legal right. This is so important. It was demand-driven. That means any adult in a rural household could literally walk up and ask for work, and the government was legally on the hook to provide it. This wasn't just a helping hand, it was a safety net woven into the very fabric of the law.
And this law, it's got quite a history. It kicked off way back in 2006, actually starting in Andhra Pradesh, and it created this totally revolutionary right to work. Over the years, it expanded and helped build all sorts of useful things across rural India. We're talking roads, water tanks, you name it. But today, that era is coming to a close, as the government rolls out its replacement.
But here's where the story gets really complicated. The reality of that 100-day promise, it was never the same for everyone. To see just how different things could be, we're going to look at two villages. They're right near each other, living under the exact same law, but their experiences are worlds apart.
So first, let's head back to Bandarugudem, because here, that guarantee of work, the one that looked so solid on paper, well, on the ground, it feels more like a promise that's been cracked and broken.
Just listen to the raw frustration here from Medabalamin Dhanalaxmi. She says she has to fight with local officials just to get work for 2 weeks. She knows her relatives in other villages are getting their 100 days, but for her, it's a constant battle. This is what a broken promise sounds like.
So what's the deal? Why the struggle? Well, the source material points to some deep structural problems. For one, Bandarugudem is a pretty small local governing unit, so there just aren't many community projects to generate work. But the real kicker? The village tank. This was once a reliable source of jobs, cleaning it out and so on. But it got leased out for fish farming, and just like that, a vital lifeline was cut. The result is pretty shocking. Last year, people here got an average of just 30 days of work. 30 out of a guaranteed 100.
Okay, now let's take a short trip over to the neighboring village, Amparapuram. And wow, the difference is just night and day. We're about to see a completely different story play out.
Here, we meet a guy named Gandaboyana Venkateshwar Rao. He actually used the scheme to build a livestock shed for his buffaloes. And this is a perfect example of what was possible when the system worked the way it was supposed to. It wasn't just about getting a daily wage, it was about using that opportunity to build a more secure future for yourself.
And in Amparapuram, you can literally see the success. The roads are wider and paved. The houses are more permanent structures. People have built real individual assets, from those livestock sheds to even oil palm plantations. And the numbers, they tell the same story. Residents there have already knocked out 70 to 80% of their workdays for this year. This is what the promise fulfilled looks like.
So it's against this backdrop, this tale of two villages, one of success and one of struggle, side by side, that the government introduces this new scheme called VBGRAMG.
In this slide, this is the absolute core of the whole issue. It shows the fundamental shift that's happening. MGNREGA was a legal right. It was demand-driven, meaning the power was with the workers. The new way? It's described as an administratively managed scheme. What does that mean? It means employment is now shaped by things like budgets and government notifications. The power shifts. So the bottom line is this. The guarantee is moving from being a law that empowers people to a scheme that's controlled by the administration. That is a massive change.
And you can bet that this very shift from a legal right to a government scheme is raising some serious red flags for policy experts, advocacy groups, and political opponents. This chart shows you exactly why they're so worried. I mean, even with a legal guarantee, there was already a huge gap between the promise and what people actually got. This data from a research group called LibTech India shows that in Andhra Pradesh, that 100-day promise only translated to an average of about 51.5 days of work. So the fear is, if you take away the force of law, what happens to that gap? It could turn into a chasm.
So LibTech India's analysis really spells out the potential dangers. First, it removes the citizen's explicit right to demand work. It also allows for a more selective rollout, which could mean vulnerable communities get left behind. And remember, governments were already rationing funds even when the law said they couldn't. On top of all that, a new funding ratio puts a bigger financial weight on the states, which could give them even more reason to limit the work that's available.
So the recommendation from experts like Chakradhar Buddha is crystal clear. He says the state should push the central government to hold on to MGNREGA's statutory employment guarantee, keep it as a legal right.
And all of this brings us right back to where we started, back to the dusty lanes of rural India, and to the people who are now facing some very real and very big unanswered questions about their future.
Because at the end of the day, for people like Bareyayama, all this talk about policy names and legislative frameworks, it's just noise. What matters is something you can touch. What matters is the work, the chance to earn a wage, to support your family, to live with a little bit of dignity.
So this is the ultimate question, right? Will this new framework actually fix the real-world problems, like a village tank being leased out, that made the old law fail in places like Bandarugudam? Or does taking away the legal guarantee just remove the one tool people had to fight for their rights, without solving any of the underlying issues? Can this new approach finally bridge that huge gap between villages like Bandarugudam and Ampuram? Or is it just going to make that divide even wider?